Let's get it. This is Life's Essential Ingredients with Jeff and a Mike, where we hope to inform, inspire, and transform lives, one essential ingredient at a time. Welcome to the show. All right, man. Hey, sometimes we have a little dialogue with our guests before kind of off the air, listeners, to give you some behind the scenes stuff. And our guest today is like, hey, let's go. We got work to do. I'm ready. This is what I do. And so we just want to welcome Debbie Godfrey coming from Louisville, Kentucky. And Debbie, before we even get into the show, I just want to let you know our prayers are with you and everybody in the Midwest that has been affected by the tornadoes and lost lives. And so just wanted to honor that, and everybody out in the Midwest. We're praying for you. So sorry to hear about all that. And I know you're in Louisville. Don't know the state that well, but were you affected at all?
No, our storm, it brushed us. It went south and east, but I'll tell you, it was heartbreaking and devastating to watch. And I was surprised and shocked in a great way of how much outpouring the community could take care of each. Nobody was homeless. Everybody was taking in everybody else. Like, it was almost like just this big family that took care of each other. And so it was amazing to watch the beauty that came out of the tragedy as well. And the rescue and recovery is still underway. So yes, our prayers are constantly there, and any support people around the country have been giving has been we've been super grateful for it.
It's definitely our country. I don't want to get off topic here, but makes my heart feel so good to hear you share that. And our country has always done that, a rally in times of adversity and need. And I hope we can get to the space where that just becomes, we just do that every day and look out for our brothers and sisters, period, end. And it doesn't necessarily have to take such a tragedy for us to do that. And there's so many good people out there, but it just, hopefully we can do it a little bit more. But I want to get into your expertise. And first of all, again, Debbie Godfrey, she's coming from Louisville, Kentucky. You can find her through her website, positiveparenting.com, or on Instagram at positiveparentingdebbie. So here's what she does and why she's on our show. Debbie helps parents regain control of their homes and break the vicious cycle of yelling at their children through her hard-earned positive parenting philosophies. Early in her parenting role, Debbie would yell, plead, scream, give timeouts, spank, ask in a soft, kind voice. No matter what she tried, nothing worked. Been there, done that. Mike and I are parents. I have 2 kids. Mike has 4. And so, at the expense of a failed marriage, a short stay in a battered women's shelter with her 3 children, and new parenting counsel from professionals, Debbie finally realized something had to change. Debbie realized that in order for her life to change, she had to change. Debbie was introduced to positive parenting philosophy, and from that point forward, Debbie has forever been changed. She spent the last 30 years perfecting her technique to coach parents to achieve the following results. Have your children following your directions without yelling. Dramatically decrease tantrum times. Go to the grocery store happily with your children by your side. Have your children doing tasks without you reminding them, not 1, not 10, but 100 times. Transition your kids from one location to another with ease, and have your children in bed by 8:30 without a fuss, just to name a few, my pasho. So over the years and working with parents all over the globe, Debbie discovered one universal truth. We all love our children and want the very best for them. Debbie empowers her clients with education about why kids do what they do and what your actions mean to them. Debbie hosts Positive Parenting Pep Talk podcast, so make sure you tune into that, and is an invaluable resource to parents all over the world. Debbie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really looking forward to this, and I can't wait to see what questions you have.
Yeah. And just, in the results that you achieve, anybody that's listening that doesn't have kids might be, oh man, no big deal. Have your kids follow directions. Yeah, no, it's not easy. And parenting is the most difficult job. And yeah, there's books out there, but it's kind of one of those things you have to experience. And if you can have a guru such as yourself to kind of cut down some of the learning curve, just invaluable. So yeah, I'm really excited to get into this and help the listeners. And listeners, thank you for tuning into another episode. Again, we're in 27 countries now. People tuning in from all over the U.S. as well. And we just want to thank you for being part of C4 Leaders, which is a nonprofit that is part of this Life's Essential Ingredients. And so thank you for that. So Debbie, we always start our show with the thought of the day, and yours is a very simple one. And so I'll give it to you, and then you just kind of give me what you think about the thought. So here we go. It's from Carl Jung, and another shout out to Be Easy, because Carl Jung is a Swiss psychologist who did so much great work with understanding people. But here it is. Children are educated by what the grown-up is and not by his talk. Why would I pick that one for you?
Oh, so many reasons, because it's absolutely true. Yes, it's like there's another one. Your words speak so strongly. Your actions speak so strongly. I can't hear what you say. And so, yes, it's so true that we're role modeling everything for our children. And in fact, our communication is something like 70% body language, 55% tone of voice. It's only 7% the words that we use. And so, yes, that's absolutely wonderful. And we love Carl Jung. Yes.
Yeah, he is very good. All right, so my first question is you've been doing this for 30 years, and how has the role of a parent changed during that time? What have you seen? How has that evolved of a parent's job and everything that they have on their plate, and then influence the work that you do in helping them be the best parent they can?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do see trends because I've been in this so long. And one of the first trends that I saw happen was fathers entering the parenting world in a much larger way. In fact, when I first started teaching, mostly moms took my classes, and occasionally couples, but the majority were moms. And as time went on, more and more dads started coming, and not just with their wives, but they came on their own. And there was a point I remember where I had more dads in a class than moms. And I was like, oh, this is great. And it is so good for our children. Historically, fathers have gone out, historically in our recent past, meaning the last couple hundred years, fathers have gone out into the workplace and mothers stay home with the children. And so many kids have missed out on their fathers because they were out working. And in fact, with all of the divorce that's happened the last 40 or 50 years, fathers who start their second families often spend way more time with the children of the second family because they realized from that first one what they missed out on. And so I've seen that trend as well, where a father parenting for the second time is much, much more involved. So that's and I think that comes top of mind because I'm speaking with the two of you, and to see that you're both very involved dads, and you're talking about parenting and family and that sort of thing. And it's just, I love seeing as many fathers or more gathering in the coffee shops with each other, with their children in the morning, walking their kids to school, doing all of the things that have traditionally been led by moms. And it is so good for the kids. It is so good for the kids. I mean, moms are great. We're very nurturing. We're wonderful, but we can be a little more emotional, and to have the level-headed, typical male energy of sensibility and fun. I mean, a lot of moms will say, oh, those dads, man, you got to watch out. They're going to drop those kids. But at the same time, there's some fun to that. The kids get they get to stretch and grow and, become more risk takers, which I see as, as an entrepreneur, I've always seen that as an advantage. So yes, that's one big trend. I mean, there's so many. I've actually seen it go a couple of times where people parent really strict and then they get too lenient and then they get too strict and then we get too lenient. There's a generational effect of that where one generation lets the kids run amok, so the next one's more strict, so the next one lets them run amok. And the whole point of positive parenting is to bring that into balance where we're both kind and firm and keep that at a nice middle range.
Yeah, Debbie, I think me and my Pasha, we needed this conversation about 20 something years ago to figure it out.
Yeah.
But my question kind of is, you get thrown into parenting, and you get from a bunch of people, get all this different advice. How do you know if what you're doing is right or not? Is there a way to tell if your parenting is okay or if you have to change it?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. One is the results. What results are you getting? Do your kids seem to be developing well? Do you have a decent relationship? Are you able to get a certain amount of compliance when it's needed? So kids' job is to test the limits, to push the boundaries. Like that's their job. We should expect them not to listen to us. We should expect them to bend the rules, to try to break them, to try to push us. That's their job. Our job is to establish good boundaries and limits while at the same time empowering them and picking and choosing our battles wisely so that when we really need to set a boundary and be like, that's not okay, or you need to do this, that they'll comply. And they'll only comply if there's flexibility in the areas that aren't so important. So if we make everything a battle, everything will be a battle. And you don't get any compliance. If you don't set any limits or boundaries, they run amok and they're miserable to be around. So there's this happy medium of picking and choosing the things that you're going to go for. And that's I think one of the most essential pieces is to understand that part of kids and be okay with that.
I love it. I love it. I got a real live case scenario for you. So I just got back from visiting Mike. He's down in San Pedro, Los Angeles area. I live up north. And when I was waiting for him to pick me up, there was a family of 5, mom, dad, about 11-year-old boy, probably about a 1-year-old that the boy was pushing in the stroller, and then a 3-year-old. And the 3-year-old was giving her parents the business, and she was dressed up in some sort of Disney outfit and carrying some stuffed animal, but she was kicking and screaming, and the parents, everybody was like struggling. So you got to fill in a lot of blanks. So I'm putting you in a tough spot, but let's just say they realized, wait a second, that's Debbie Godfrey. She's the guru of parenting. We got to stop. Who cares if we miss our plane? But let's have her give us some insight. And so what questions would you ask, or what tips would you give if these parents that are just pulling out their hair and this kid's just really kicking and screaming, and just like I saw, what would you say if they say, hey, Debbie, help us out?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, to understand that developmental stage, the highest percentage of parents sign up for my classes when they have a 3-year-old. And it's because that 3-year-old developmentally, they're in this place of what is my power in the world and where are the limits in my world? And this is where more than ever, and when they're teenagers, that balance of both kind and firm needs to be in place. And so what happens when you have a child like that, she sounds to me like she's expressing, I need more power in my world, or you haven't set enough limits on me, so I'm just taking power all over the place. It's hard to say. I'd have to observe it for a few days and get some feedback from the parents. But to understand, all kids need an appropriate feeling of power, and they also need limits. So our job as a parent is to figure out what are the limits and what can they be powerful over. So when you talked about her holding a doll and her having these clothes, it's like sometimes those are the negotiations we make, that you can have this and you can have this, but you can't have this. And so figuring out how to empower them age appropriately so that they feel powerful, but also to have limits. And so every situation would be different. I would not stop a person on the street. Like I've been in the mall where families have had trauma happening. And I remember distinctly one time I was with my mom and she's like really loud. She says it's too loud. She's like, go give him your card. And I'm like, Mom, the last thing a parent needs who's struggling with their kids is for some, person to come over and give them their card. If I'm going to go help somebody, I'm not going to go over there as Debbie from Positive Parenting. I'm going to go as another parent like, oh, this is so difficult. Can I hold the baby? Can I hold your package? Can I do something for you to help you through this really stressful moment? So I think that more than anything else, if a parent's experiencing that, in the moment, it's like, how can I help them? Think about on the plane, how can I distract that baby who's crying and screaming and this poor parent's trying to keep them quiet, which is impossible. How can I help that parent who's struggling? That's what I think about as another parent, not as an expert of anything. And then, yes, so when that couple comes and says, what do we do? This kid's out of control. I'll start talking about, asking questions like, how can your child be powerful? What can she be in charge of? What can she have choices about? And then being able to set the limits around her being empowered with something.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I keep writing down. I take a lot of notes because I'm always just trying to learn and grow and get better. And, balance I have written down a few times, empowerment, a whole bunch. And it just seems like, the title of our podcast is Life's Essential Ingredients, and you start looking at, all right, well, you can have too many ingredients and then nothing's essential. But in listening to you, just empowerment, and we're all seeking to find our way in the world. And that comes with some feeling like we have control, and if I'm processing what you're saying, regardless of the young person's age, how can you allow them to feel like they have control while at the same time realize they're part of this family and I'm the mom or the dad and I am the one implementing how much control you have that works for our family, and finding back to balance, and so challenging, and I think that's one of the things, not to mix the subject matter here, but in order to do what you're suggesting and what I'm talking about takes you to be in a really good space mentally as the adult, and what advice do you have for people if you're given one of your classes and, one of the parents is just on their phone and just distracted, which I think you talk about empowerment and balance and you haven't used the word being present, but that goes with reading the situation and what's going on. How do you think technology has influenced the role of parenting just with our devices and things? And I know that's probably not your expertise area, but I think it's something that we got to talk about.
Well, yeah, the last 7 years, the number one complaint parents have is screen time. Like that's the thing. They come and it's like, they're out of their minds. They don't know how to set limits. They don't know how to control it. And it has kind of turned parenting on its head. That screen, it goes so far beyond a TV. Like I personally chose not to have a TV raising my kids, just from all of the things around that. And I know a lot of people think I'm crazy, but that's what worked for me. And so my kids are not addicted to TV, but then screens come along. We have screens. We started having screens and, it's super challenging. And I agree with you. Like that presence is so important. And that's another trend I've seen. Initially the screens came from the children. And so we had to discipline the children and set limits around the children and screens. And then that next generation, those children that were raised with screens became parents addicted to their screens. And now we see the children wanting the parents to get off the screens. Like that's what I've seen frequently in the last 10 or 15 years is, my mom, my dad is always on the screen and I need them off the screen so that I can interact. So again, there's these shifts that happen as a reaction to what the previous generation or whatever it was did. And, I have 3 grown children and 5 grandchildren. and my daughter has my 3 grandsons, and they've done a really good job of, and they don't have TV either, but they have screens, and they've done a really good job of minimizing the screens. And then pandemic hit. And I think all bets were off. As soon as pandemic hit, all the things that I had taught about screens and all the things people were trying to do with screens, we had to adjust, we had to shift, we had to, lessen some of our expectations, because school is now done on screens, or at least it was throughout the first year and a half of the pandemic. So it's a moving target. And as you said, I'm not in no way an expert, but what I do know how to do is set limits and boundaries. I do know how to observe my own children, my grandchildren, and then anybody that I coach. We can observe the kids. The kids have, just as adults do, we all have, some of us have addictive qualities and some of us don't. So some of us are set up to be addicts of whatever. And that same concept, I think, works really well when we're talking about screens. There's some kids that have a super hard time getting off those screens. And there's other kids that can take it or leave it. When the parents say it's okay, they go. And when the parents say get off, they stop. But then there's the other ones who absolutely flip out. So with those ones, my experience has been, you have to observe them and see what their point of no return is. And it's usually 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes max. An hour is there's almost no child with an addictive predisposition that can go an hour without getting hooked in. So you have to see at what point they become monster child on the screen. And you have to back that up and set your limits before it gets to that point. Does that make sense?
For sure. And as I was just with Mike, and I'm a nurse is what I've done for 29 years. And the first step in the nursing process, I could ask my pasha, but I don't want to wake him up over there, is to assess. And so yeah, we're asking the parent, hey, be vigilant of where your child is on that spectrum of getting hooked in to where it is the point of no return. And the challenging, we had a really good doctor from Connecticut, Dr. Rosanna Capella Hodge, who's working with kids with depression and bipolar and anxiety and addiction and everything else. And for her research, the average for adolescent being on their device is 7.22 hours a day, right now. And I still think that's low, to be honest. And then you start doing the math, let's just say that's the number, and they're in school for, 7 hours or so. And then they're supposed to be sleeping. So basically, with the pandemic, and again, and you're like, hey, it was what it was and is what it is, still now. But basically the kids are probably on some sort of device almost every waking minute, right now. And I just, I got nothing against technology, but I just think it's something that we could do as adults, do a better job of helping the kids find that balance and knowing, just like any other tool, using technology as a tool to help us build relationships and connect and learn and grow, as opposed to using it as a babysitter or something to pass time. And I think that's where our brain goes right now. It's just like, hey, I got nothing to do, so let me just pick up my device, and then there goes our dopamine, and now we're really in a bad spot. So, but I don't want to get going on that. I do want to I'm coaching. Mike and I are high school basketball coaches, and I'm coaching at a local school right up the street. And it's a small school, and so my players are amazing, and they're young ladies, and I have so much respect for them and their parents and everything that they're doing. But just being new to that community, and it's universal, so it's not just where I'm coaching, but it's usually that 10 kind of 90 rule. 10% of the people do 90% of the work. And so my young ladies are incredible young ladies, and they're the 10%. And so they're involved with band. They're involved with 4-H. They're involved with robotics. They're the ones taking all the tough AP courses and working. they're at a young age, they're just pulled in so many different directions. And I guess my question is, what's the balance? One of those words that I've written down a bunch from listening to you, but what advice would you give for, one of my parents, maybe that their daughter is just doing a whole bunch, and what is the balance and what's healthy, I guess? What would be some guidelines? And I don't know if I'm asking that clear enough for you to give me an answer.
Maybe. I think that for me, it's about, number one, you're dealing with those kids who's super self-motivated if they're doing all of that stuff. And what you're saying is they probably want to. And I think that's a huge distinction. Are they doing it because they want to, or are their parents pushing them into it? If their parents are pushing them into it, then this doesn't even matter. We can't have this conversation because they're not going to listen to me, right? But let's say that it's more child-led, and so the parent just wants to make sure that the child's being healthy. And already with my 7-year-old grandson, I will do this same thing with him because he likes to do a lot of things. He just finished doing cross country, and I would have conversations with him about, are you having fun? Do you like working this hard? We would talk about, what you have to do to succeed and how much practice you have to put in. Like, does that sound like as much work as you want to invest at this time in your life with all the other things that you have to do, to help a child look at in a more rounded way? And if you're talking about the girls you're talking about that are teenagers, it's like, so you're doing band, track, 4-H, basketball, how is your life? And you want to ask questions, open-ended or leading questions. So I wouldn't assume anything. I would say, tell me how it's going. Like, what do you notice? Do you feel like you're getting enough of the things that you want to do in your life? And I think if I was a parent in that situation, I would try to come up with an example from my own teenager years. Like when I was doing, I always had a horse, so that was my relaxation. I didn't do too much. I've never been, I'm a hard worker, but I never crammed my life full of stuff because I like to have my freedom. But it's like, I would try to think of something related and say, I experienced this when I was that age, not to be preachy, but to really come from a genuine place. In fact, I just had a chat with my grandson this morning. It's not the same topic, but I had a dream last night that was kind of disturbing about this dog that we had. And all of a sudden, after I shared this dream, he started sharing with me. He's never told me anything about dreams before. And all I did was say, I shared the dream. And I said, do you ever have dreams? And I got information I had no idea was going on with this kid and his dreams. And so I think coming from a place of empathy, like I've been there, I know what it's like, and this is what I experienced. Have you ever experienced something the same? And I think you could get into a super great conversation with one of those girls from that aspect. And you might be surprised. Maybe one of those things she doesn't really want to do, but there's pressure from somewhere. Maybe she's not achieving as much as she wants. Maybe she's achieving too much. I don't know. It could go in any direction, but the main point is connecting, listening, and understanding, like, how is this child dealing with this? And if you think they're dealing fine because they don't complain, that doesn't mean it. You want to look at their life and see if they're experiencing any signs of stress, any signs of lack of balance. And it's funny you keep mentioning balance because I'm teaching a class tomorrow for a school district I'm working for. Balancing Love and Discipline is the title.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it. I love how you use love. And my pastor has a question, but I just want to throw this. We're putting on a free clinic next Wednesday, and we got a really cool shirt that each camper is going to get, and it has just the word love on it. And yeah, what we do is just so much more important than a game. And I think maybe it's just the nurse in me and having a sense of urgency with life and being surrounded by death in that role. I just think we could do a better job of really enhancing the definition and the action that people can take to bring that word to life. And so, I'm so excited that you're doing that work and we're doing it as well. But my Pasho's got a little follow-up.
He's muted.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
I'm still figuring out how to use the mute button. Bear with me. Technology is definitely not my thing. But my question is, I'm going to take it kind of to the coaching aspect, and what kids want to get out of it. And a lot of times what the kids want to get out of it is not what the parents want them to get out of it. And a lot of times as coaches, we have trouble dealing with the kids and their parents. I'm going to say especially their parents. Kids generally seem to be all right. Is there some way, like when you're talking about parenting to a parent, and how do you open their eyes to see something without offending them, without getting into some crazy argument about it because you see differently? You're seeing something different than what they are. Is there any technique that you use?
Yeah, and I mean, it mirrors and mimics what I teach in my classes in general, and that is, again, asking questions and making observations. Like I teach this to parents when they're parenting, but I would also do the same thing with a parent who, in this case, to me, an adult acting like a child, I use my same skills and tools that I teach, right? And that's why I taught for 18 years. Actually, I'm from Southern California. So I was born and raised and lived in Ventura County for my whole life until 4 years ago. And so I taught for the County of Ventura wellness program for 18 years. And all employees of that county had my classes available to them. And the parents who took my classes there used what they learned as much or even more with their coworkers, their bosses, and their subordinates, because it's all really good communication skills to use with children and people acting like children, which is what happens so often in our work relationships. And so with those parents, I would, again, one of my two best traits is being compassionate and empathetic. Like I can really sit in somebody's shoes. And so even when it's somebody that I may not agree with, I can be, in that perspective. And so I would just be asking a leading question. Have you ever noticed that your daughter does X, when blank happens? You'd have to use a specific example, whatever your concern is there. Have you ever thought about whatever? Do you have any concerns? Or you can even say, Mike, I have a concern. Would you like to hear it? Or I have a suggestion. Do you want to know what it is? And I always ask permission before I give suggestions, because some people don't want to hear. And if somebody says no, then what's the point of telling somebody something that they don't want to hear? That's especially true with children. I'll ask the kids, like, can I make a suggestion? And if they say no, I'm like, oh, okay. And I walk off, and they usually come after me. Okay, what? Because they can't stand it. But if you bluster your way through and just keep spouting all your lecturing and everything, they just tune you out. They don't listen to you. And I feel like I have super valuable information for them. I'm on their side. I love them. I want to support them. And if they're not willing to listen, if they're not interested in what I have to say, I'm not going to waste my breath. Like, you have to earn my wise words. And you do that by listening, like by paying attention. And I'm going to ask your permission, and you have to give it to me, or I won't give you the words. And so a lot of what I teach is nonverbal, like taking action and not using words, because the kids tune us out so much. And it gives you so much more influence as a parent. It gives you so much more, you have a lot more weight when you're not using your words, when you're using your actions. And so again, with those parents, again, without having a specific example, I would just be very empathetic and considerate, but ask leading questions and see if you can guide them to understanding a little more about what might be going on with their child that you can see as a coach as an outside position.
I love it. And it just goes back. It's crazy how our thought of the day always rings true. And I'm going to say it one more time. Children are educated by what the grown-up is. Just what you're talking about, the actions that we're taking, and not by his talk. And speaking of actions, parents with COVID, and I'm blessed because my kids are 23 and 25. And so they're doing their thing. But I could not imagine being a parent of children in the current educational system where everybody, was on Zoom, and now all of a sudden I'm the psychologist, I'm the teacher, I'm the coach, I'm the PE teacher. I'm doing my job from home while educating my kids. How have you helped parents through COVID, dealing with all these different hats that they've been wearing? Because I imagine you probably got pretty busy, because I think it's the hardest job to be a parent in the first place. And then with COVID and them having to wear so many more hats, what has been like your key takeaways that you've offered to your clients or people that have reached out to you? And have you seen, first of all, with COVID, just people needing your services so much more?
Yeah, absolutely. And COVID has been great for my business, I'm sorry to say, but it has.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you what happened was I've had my business for a long time. I'm an entrepreneur. I've pivoted plenty of times from, teaching in person to then I taught on the phone. Like I did teleclasses back in the early 2000s. And, I've transformed myself and my business many times over. And when COVID hit, I was kind of in a place where I was traveling and I was teaching classes, mostly in New York and Chicago and LA. And I love doing that. I love traveling. And that's my, a fun gig. And all my work dried up, like everything canceled that I had out in front of me. I think my last gig was in February of 2020. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do now? I don't know. And, and I didn't worry about it because that's how I am. And one of my dearest friends called me up and she's like, you've got to help parents. Like they need help. And I'm like, I don't like teaching for free. No. And she's like, no, you have. And I'm like, okay, if you do it with me, because I'm like you, Mike, the technology just drives me crazy. And so she agreed to do the Zoom, manage the Zoom part if I agreed to teach. So we started April 3rd. Every day we got on here for a half an hour. It was from 2 to 2:30 Eastern time. And I taught a half an hour I just went through all the topics I've ever taught one at a time, every day, Monday through Friday. And every day we'd have around 80 parents from all over the world. And there was parents from India up at midnight in India to be on live with me, because what I did as an entrepreneur, it was free from 2 to 2:30, but if you miss it and you want to buy the recordings, you had to pay for them. And so that's how I was able to start generating some income again. And it was fantastic. Number one, the parents that were on there were so grateful. We came together and supported each other. They were in the chat, just loving on each other, supporting each other. We were learning something new. I was answering questions. It was like a safe, wonderful moment of sanity in an insane world. And my observation, I did that for about, I think we did it 6 or 7 or 8 months. I can't remember how long. And then I got tired of it. So I quit doing that. But my observation was that the parents who were handling it well, and handling it well means adapting and doing the best they could, because what you were saying was so true. Trying to sit there and be on your job back to back with the computers and your kids over here, you're trying to keep them focused on being in their class and you're trying to do your work. It was nuts. And the expectations on the parents, I think the biggest population that was devastated was parents with children with special needs. All of those services dried up. You've got those kids at home. That is ridiculous. So it's just all of that. The parents who just did the best they could. And what this meant was so many parents were enjoying the time with their kids. Like, wow, I'm actually home with my kids. Like, this is interesting. Let's see if we can make this work. And actually connecting, like you were saying before, like that connection, that time together. So parents who did that, parents who adapted the best they could, their kids have done okay. The parents who are super stressed out, freaking out, don't know what's going to happen next, constantly in anxiety and stress, those kids aren't doing so okay. And it goes right back to your thought of the day, right back to your thought of the day. So if we're able to manage this And it was all new for me too. I've never experienced a pandemic. Like, I'm just teaching the same thing I've always taught with this backdrop of our huge shift in what's happening in the world. And so, all of us needed to adapt, to go with the flow in some sane way. And you are setting the example and the role model for your kids. And I had to remember that all the time. I'm actually, I live in an apartment above my daughter and my 3 grandkids. So I'm very involved in their world. And I just loved the way my daughter and son-in-law handled, the kids. They did a great job. I would take them out hiking, in places that were remote, like away from people. So we were getting outdoors. We, they were handling it well. Those kids have handled it well. They've role modeled what to do, and they've been safe and sane, and they were very responsible with their masks. These kids have no problems wearing masks. The areas where the parents are fighting against the masks, those kids are going to fight against the masks, right? We're setting the example for how we want this to look. And so whatever you want to see, you've got to walk that talk and role model that. And so I think that's the hope, and what I've loved to see during this pandemic is the huge shifts in the focus of parents with their children, especially when they've chosen. I mean, look at the exit from the workforce that's going around the news, lately and stuff. It's like a lot of those people have said, hey, maybe I do want to raise my own kids, like in some fashion. Let's see what this looks like. Quit working and take care of the kids and just figure out how to make an income. It's been, I mean, I only see hope and joy even in places. And, I know there are people who've been devastated and, situations that are dire, but, I'm positive parenting. So I look at the positive.
That's right. That's right. No, I love that. And so true. I want to jump, you mentioned it a couple of times, but the role of empathy, and how would you, if a parent comes to you like, hey, I want to learn about that and I want to make sure, my child develops that. What advice would you give that parent, and how important do you think empathy is for a child to learn and to own that?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely imperative. I mean, obviously it's luckily a natural gift I have, but not everybody has that. Some people build it or develop it. And this goes back to, at the very beginning, we talked about what was happening in Kentucky. And you said, well, you didn't want to get off track and it's not related, but I really saw that as related, that the ability of people to be generous and to feel community comes from how you were raised, right? And there's a saying out there, hurt people, people that were not raised well or that were abused, neglected. Most of those are the ones that cause problems in our society. They hurt other people because they've been hurt. And so I do see it as very related. And so empathy to me is something you can't teach it to children. You can't teach kids to share. You can't teach kids to be responsible. What you have to do is you have to give them the qualities that you want them to learn. So if you want a child to be responsible, you give them responsibility. You don't say, I want you to be responsible and now blah, 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 blah. You say, here, you're in charge of this. You're in charge of putting the silverware away, or you're in charge of whatever. You're giving them responsibility. So with empathy, it's the same thing. You give it to them. So you empathize with them. Children can only learn something that they've been given. Okay. So I teach how to support leadership from your children. And I do an exercise where I put somebody in charge of being the leader. And we either sabotage the leader or we support the leader. What can I do? How can I help? Where do I need you to be? And out of that comes when you have a child who's doing something in the family that's showing leadership. Like one time my son was out in the backyard and he was kicking the ball against the wall. And I said, hey girls, let's go be on Michael's team. And the girls and I went out there and we were like, Michael, we want to be on your team. Where do you want us to be? What do you want us to do? And he split us up and set up a little game, you know, a little kickball game. And it's like, wow, thanks for leading that, Michael. So we're putting them, I put him in this position of being a leader. So I'm giving him leadership. I'm not teaching it to him necessarily. So all of these qualities, empathy in particular, when your child does something that might be a bummer, then you empathize. Wow, that's a bummer. Instead of criticizing or judging or condemning, when they make a mistake, when they've failed at something, when something's been super hard for them, like, I know how that feels. Oh, I remember one time my son was such a little guy. He was probably like 4 or 5. And we were walking down the sidewalk and I stubbed my toe and it started bleeding profusely and it hurt like heck. And I'm like, ah, and I was like, stop, I can't walk. And I'm like screaming and crying. And he comes over, this little guy, and he goes, I hate when that happens. Words I'd used all the time when bad things happen. It's like, oh, that's such a bummer. I hate when that happens. And he gave it right back to me, and it felt so good just to have him understand where I was, you know. And so, you know, I absolutely can see how giving them empathy brings it back.
I love that. What a great story. I told you I'm coaching, and our team is a little bit remote in rural areas, and we go play other teams in rural areas, which we're doing today, and we're taking advantage of that time. We have a book club, and it's Angela Duckworth's Grit. I don't know if you've read that book or not, but it's basically persevering through challenges, you know. And so what advice, you know, and you're saying, hey, giving them, you know, how would you suggest someone help their child, you know, develop grit, just stick through these challenges when I think, you know, right now it's, I don't want to use the word easier, but I'll use that one so I don't sit here for an hour trying to come up with the right word. But it's easier to just try something for a quick second. It didn't work out, and now I'm going to move on. You know, and there's something, you never know the gift that you have until you can kind of figure out, hey, let me stick to it a little bit and see if I can enjoy it versus I tried it and it didn't work out and I'm done. You know, what advice would you give to a parent to help their child develop, you know, grit? And I don't know if you're following, you know, the definition of grit that we're using.
Well, I don't know exactly, but I can get a sense of it. And I would say it starts already. I see myself doing this with my 17-month-old grandson. He's now walking, and I walk the older grandson to school. It's a mile and a half each way. So we've got a big walk in the morning, and I usually have the stroller. But now this little guy's wanting to walk, so I'm letting him walk a lot. And what I notice a lot is he'll trip or he'll fall over something and he'll fall down. And you know, my instinct as a mom is I want to run over to pick him up, right? But I don't. I just kick back. I watch him fall, and he's either going to start crying or he's going to pick himself up and move on. But if I jump in there too quickly, I'm going to subvert that, his learning to pick himself up and move on. And if he's really hurt, obviously I'll tend to him. But I want him to be able to fall and hurt himself and see that he can pick himself up and keep going. And he has to have the freedom and the time to do that. So in answer to your question, I would say to parents, have the patience to allow your children to make mistakes. Have the patience to let them fail. And maybe it's over and over on something, and keep encouraging them to stick with it, you know, stick with it and keep trying, and, you know, stay with the job until it's done. Keep working at that until you achieve what you want to achieve. And remind them all the stories if they're interested in a conversation. You know, how many things did Edison invent before the light bulb? It was like this enormous number of inventions he made before he got to the light bulb. And how many elections did Lincoln lose? There was all these things about perseverance. So we have to let our kids experience hurt and pain. And I think this is what parents are particularly bad at in these days. We're way too overprotective. And if they don't develop that resilience by having failures and overcoming them, they won't get that grit that you're talking about. So it's super important to allow them to make their mistakes and just to be there as a support, as a nurture, as a safe haven when when they're experiencing the consequences of the world out there, that we're the safe place that they come to. We're not trying to mimic. I don't like when parents say, well, the world's a tough place, so I'm going to make it tough on them. So they know that's not the appropriate way to do it. It's that your children are going to experience adversity. The world is adversity. And you want to be that safe place that they can come to get questions answered, to get comfort when they need it. But they need to fall. They need to fail. They need to have a support system so that when they get back up, they can get back to it and find success again.
Man, I love it. I love it. I love it. And that's, what you did and how you've had this amazing career. You got knocked down, not going to get into your failed marriage or your battered women's shelter. But obviously you experienced a lot of adversity and have use that as your greatest asset, because it's led to incredible work that you've done to help so many parents, and therefore, I don't know how many thousands and thousands of children. That's what's so cool about what you do. You're just, the work that you're doing, and I'm sure you realize it, but it's going to go on and on and on, and I guess I got two more questions for you. At this point in your life, what are your life's essential ingredients? What are a couple of ingredients that are just, man, hey, I need that in my life? What do you think?
Well, for me, it's service. It's being of service. And it's, it came from my parents. I always saw them. My parents would take in pregnant unwed mothers. Like what was up with that? This is a long time ago, right? This is a strange thing, but I saw that. And then my dad would take care of elderly people, and he was part of the food pantry, and so that was really ingrained in me to be of service. And I've noticed over my lifetime, being of service makes me whole, and I went through a period of time, especially because I'm in my life's work is taking care of people, it's being of service, but I'm also making my income at it. So there's some conflict there. And so I went through, a period of time where those things were messed up, and it's like giving too much of myself and being able to set good boundaries and, make sure that I'm generating the income I need while at the same time taking care of people. Cause otherwise then I don't want to take care of people anymore, but then now that I've come through so many phases of that, essentially I'm a giver. And I get my greatest joy from doing things for people. I had a class one time, and this was 20 something years ago. And, sometimes the class would give me a little gift at the end or something, it was really cute. And this one class gave me a card that they had all signed. And on the front, it just said over and over, like 100 times, it said, wake up, do nice things, go to bed. Wake up, do nice things, go to bed. And I was like, oh, they get me. Like, that makes me happy. And I love, if you ask any of my friends who, what's my quality, it's like, I'm a giver, and, they know they can call me anytime, day or night. I'll give them a ride somewhere. They can, whatever anybody needs within, I'll set boundaries if I need to, but that makes me happy, and it makes my life fulfilled, and it makes the world a better place. Fortunately.
Yeah, that's the best when it works out that way.
Right.
When you find your purpose, and your purpose helps people and allows you to live your purpose. So cool, and so happy for you. And not to get morbid with you, but the last question of the show here, we always end this way, and it's a quote by John Alston, and it's, the only thing you take with you when you're gone is what you leave behind. And I want to fast forward now about 50 years from now. You're on your deathbed, you're surrounded by all your grandkids and great grandkids, and you've just lived an incredible life. What is it you want them to have left in their heart that you've left behind for them in the time that they've had with you?
Just to communicate love. And I think that piece that you brought in with having love, like love to me is it. And so, always love everybody. Like that's the best thing, be madly in love with everybody in your world. Like that's how I think if we all live that way, we could never hurt each other the way that, we're hurting each other, which is upsetting. So yes, love, 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 love.
Nice. I love it. Well, listeners, this has been incredible. Debbie has shared so many great tips. Again, it's what she's dedicated the last 30 years of her life. And you can find her again at positiveparenting.com or her Instagram at positiveparentingdebbie. Debbie, we thank you so much for coming on. Pashito, you got any closing remarks?
Thank you, Debbie. Really appreciate it. And I love the line, be madly in love with your world. I love that. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and listeners, we are madly in love with you for tuning in to another episode of Life's Essential Ingredients. We still can't believe it. We're season 2. This was episode 7. On with Jeff and a Mike, my Pasho, who is looking good. If you have any questions for us, you can reach out to me, Jeff at c4leaders.org, and we'd love to hear from you. With that said, boom, baby, that just happened. We out.